John McKee, and this is Building with John. In this series, we will be building an acoustic guitar. The first question that people usually ask when they find out that I build guitars is, how do you bend the sides? That will be the first session of this series. So, we will talk about the principles of wood bending. To bend wood and have it keep that shape, you need three main components. You need heat, water, and pressure. The heat and the water will soften the wood grain, and the pressure will bend it into the shape that you want it. I've used two different methods for bending wood, and so I will talk about those two. If you look on the internet, you can find a dozen more very quickly. So the sides that we're going to bend for this project are these curly walnut sides. So first we'll talk about form bending. Form bending is, as it sounds, applying the pressure within a form to shape the wood. This particular form, as you see, it's the shape of half a guitar. In the center, it has a cowl to provide the pressure on the waist, and then you simply bend the rest of the wood around the bowels. This particular form is heated by heating elements inside to provide enough heat to soften the wood so that it doesn't crack when you apply the pressure to it. I'm not going to bend my beautiful sides on this form. Because they're figured wood, I'm not really comfortable press fitting it into a form, because with figured wood it cracks easily. And so I'm going to demonstrate the bending just with a piece of scrap. It's the same figured wood, so we'll see what happens. So I've turned on the form. I plugged it in, so it's heating up nicely. And while that heats up, we're going to wet down our wood, just a spray bottle. Spray it liberally. Nice and wet, both sides. It doesn't take a lot of water, but we want to make sure that it will soften up nicely. So we wet it while we're waiting for our form to heat up. We will just set that aside. So I've fit a drill to the top of my form so I don't have to manually crank it down. We are going to fit the wood in and crank down the waist, and then we'll just bend the wood over the sides. And if all goes well, it won't crack. So we have our damp piece of wood. We're just going to slide it into the form. When you're doing this for the real piece, make sure that you mark where the center of your waist should be. Since this is just scrap, I'm just guessing. We're going to crank down our cowl. We're just going slow to allow that wood to heat up, because it won't bend without breaking if it's not heated up. Just going to straighten it out here. Well, now these last few cranks I'm going to do by hand, so I'm going to take the drill off just so I can control how fast, more easily control how fast I'm cranking down on this piece of wood. So just slowly letting the wood heat up so that it will bend where I want it to bend. Now our waist is pretty much in place, cranked down tight, and look, we already have this bend. Now I'm going to dampen this. This wood is drying a little bit as I'm working, so I'll just dampen it a little bit more. I'm going to start with the lower bout, and just slowly, as it heats, don't just crank down on it. As it heats, you can work it around the form. It's a slow, patient process. So if you don't have patience, maybe wood bending is not for you. So we just slowly work it around, working around the form. This particular form doesn't get super, oh, we're getting a crack because I went too fast. So unfortunately, it did crack. I mean, that could be fixable. And then once I get it down all the way, I simply clamp it in place. And then I go to the other side and do exactly the same thing. So we just slowly work it around, letting it heat up as it goes. And again, you got to be very patient. And you notice on the lower bout, I was not patient enough, and we got a crack. So that's why I was doing it on scrap wood for this demonstration. And so you just bring it slowly. You notice how it just slowly bends. You can feel it as you're applying pressure. It'll get very soft all of a sudden when it gets warm enough to actually bend around the form. So you just hold it where it is, and then you'll feel it give when it's ready to bend. So I have it down, and it's as simple as just clamping it in place on the other side too. Should have prepared my clamp. We just make sure it's in place, just clamp it down, and then we just let it cook here for a little bit. I don't know if I can do anything about this where we had our little crack, but we just let it sit in the form, in this particular heated form, 5 or 10 minutes. It'll dry the wood out good in this shape, and then we'll just let it sit aside till morning. The second method we will discuss for wood bending is manually bending by hand. So typically what this requires is something like this, is a bending iron. This is one I made. This is a homemade jobby. It has heating elements inside a steel pipe, and you can buy commercial versions, or you can make your own if you're handy. The principles are exactly the same as form bending. I like to hand bend because you can feel when the wood gets to that elastic state where it starts to bend. And with figured woods, you have to be very careful that it's a very fine line between bend and crack. So we're ready to hand bend. I have my iron set up. It's plugged in. It's hot. You see the steam come off. Now this particular iron has no regulator for the voltage. It simply has heating elements inside, so I can temper the outside temperature of this pipe using the water. Water absorbs a lot of heat. We'll remove that heat from the pipe. The first thing is to lay out where your bend is. Now on this one, you can see I've marked where the waist of my guitar will be. So that's the first bend I'm going to make. Remember, your sides are going to be opposite. So the first thing you do is dampen your wood, and I'm going to bend it along that line. I'm just making sure I had the sides I wanted out before I did it. So the key is to keep rocking the wood on the iron, and the heat will, essentially you're steaming the wood fibers, and the wood fibers will soften and the wood will bend. Now, you have to make sure that you keep your iron perpendicular to your sides. If you get wonky like this, you won't have a good bend. So we've had this on here for all of a few seconds, and you can see it's already starting to bend. So just light pressure, start from where it's hot and roll it to where it's not hot. And so, because you're starting with where it's already softened up and you're rolling it to where it's not yet. And you can just feel it. As you rock it, you can feel that wood soften in your hands. Yet, again, this I've got to temper the temperature of this iron with water, but so then I'm going to go the other direction here. I've set up my ideal shape. So we look, I have a form, and I'll keep going back and comparing to my form until I have the bend I want. And it's just, that is the process. You just take your time. This is a very patient activity. If you try to go too fast, you're either going to crack your wood or not get the bend that you're looking for. After drying in the form, we can now remove the clamps. Clamp the waist. And what we are left with, gotta go a little bit more. Unclamp the waist. We are left with a, that's why I used the drill first. Beautiful bent side.